So today, we're going to talk about the temple. Pastor Letty sent me last year and said, Sandy, let's do this seminar on the sanctuary. I said, well, that's great because I know that as well as I know the Jubilee calendar. I was all excited. And I got down there and I started working on it. And I ran into a brick wall. I started going down a rabbit hole. I'd get to a piece of furniture like the altar of burnt offering, and I go, oh no, I can spend an hour on this. What am I going to do? How can I combine this? If anybody knows Art Cambeek, he has videos on YouTube, and he takes 5 or 6 to tell the story of the sanctuary. It's an incredible story that has so much detail, it's very difficult to tell. So I said, Lord, you've got to help me with this. I can't be doing this. So I had to put it into a nutshell that was big enough to see the whole picture, but yet big enough to hold all those little pieces that you guys need to see. And also, before I forget, Art Cambeek was nice and gracious enough to let me use some of his little cartoons in my presentation. And also John Wood had some cartoons that he shared with me to be able to use. So what I decided to do was to show you the plan of salvation, which is the most important part of the sanctuary. And the second part is how it shadows the events in heaven in the book of Revelation. So I call this a tale of two temples, the shadow and the reality. The sanctuary study, God's character and ways are revealed in his temple. It reveals the properties of law, sin, penalty, grace, and the orderly process that God follows for the redemption of man. Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? This is why every Christian needs to study the sanctuary. And of course, I've come up with 7 reasons. Reason number 1. God's plan of salvation is the same for all since the foundation of the world. The plan for you and I was the very same plan as it was for Adam and Eve. Millions of Christians believe in dispensationalism. Although God required people to do different things at different times in history, and God declared one covenant null and void, the requirement for salvation since Adam and Eve has always been faith and faith alone. Dispensationalism is the belief that God relates to man in 7 different ways, in 7 different ages of what they call dispensationalism. The truth is that the Bible teaches God never changes and that he is no respecter of persons. We can read in Acts, Romans, and James, and it shows God does not show favoritism. The plan was implemented in the garden when Jesus offered to die in the place of the guilty couple. In the desert, God designed a skit of feasts and rituals, revealing the plan within the temple that was a shadow or parallel of events in heaven. Jesus currently serves as our high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. This proves the plan is the same plan as in Genesis. The final generation, you and I, need to know that God predetermined a plan for the salvation of mankind. Reason number 2. The earthly temple pointed backwards to Adam and Eve and pointed forward to the Messiah. Reason number 3, Sin itself is never forgiven. It is transferred to the altar. It's the sinner who actually is forgiven. Reason number 4, the temple on earth, built by Moses, was patterned after the one in heaven, built by no hands. The temple on earth is the shadow. The temple in heaven is the reality. God said, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee after the pattern of the tabernacle." Reason number 5. There are 14 prophetic end-time events that take place in the heavenly temple that correspond with events on earth. We're going to call this HELL, hell. That means it's heaven-earth linkage law. I'm going to show you that with this little symbol as we go through our study today. Reason number 6. Jesus is currently serving as our high priest in the heavenly temple. And reason number 7 may be very new to some people. Restitution for the saved takes place outside the temple and is not paid by Satan the scapegoat, as we've thought for a long time. Let's review first the furniture, because the furniture is important as to the meaning in the temple. There's the Ark of the Covenant, and it's covered with the mercy seat. It was considered to be the most holy piece of furniture because the Shekinah glory hovered between the 2 cherubim. Inside the ark were 3 items: the tablets of stone, the bowl of manna, representing the bread of life, and Aaron's budding rod. The Ark of the Covenant represents the character of God. Some people believe it represents the throne of God, but I'm going to show you in a little bit that might be a little different. The 10 Commandments represent justice, and the atonement cover or mercy seat above the law represents grace. The perfect balance between God's justice and God's mercy is defined as divine love. God placed the ark in the most holy place because his character and his government are the most important things. "For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy." The golden lampstand. It was made of pure gold with 7 lamps. It represented the special relationship with the trustees of God's covenant, the union of the human with the divine. Israel was to be the agent of light or truth on the earth. Jesus told them in Matthew that ye are the light of the world, and that I have set thee to be a light of the Gentiles, that thou shouldest be for salvation unto the ends of the earth. God required the priest to refuel the 7 lamps daily with pure olive oil, so the 7 lamps on the lampstand would burn continually through the night. The oil represents the power of the Holy Spirit that enables the light of God's truth to burn continually until the darkness of sin has been removed. Just as God held the priest responsible for the temple lights, they were also responsible for carrying the light of truth to his people. They were keepers of the flame. History confirms that they failed. Jesus told them in Luke, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, which killest the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together as a hen doth gather her brood under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." And the desolate in the concordance means empty, without God. The table of presence is also called the table of showbread. 12 loaves of bread were baked on Sabbath morning, 1 loaf for each of the 12 tribes. They represented the freshly prepared spiritual food from God's Word every Sabbath morning. Most Christians believe the Ark of the Covenant represents the throne of God. Please consider the following reasons why I believe the table of presence actually represents God's throne. The table included cups, bowls, pitchers, and utensils. It was for the priest to consume meals at regular times. It's easy to see this represented the king's table. Priests were highly honored to serve in the temple, and eating from the king's table was a sign of importance. This is what Jesus said to his disciples in Luke. "And I appoint unto you a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel." Priests were highly honored to serve in the temple, and eating from the king's table was a sign of importance. And David said, "Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually." As they say in real estate and genealogy, location, location, location. The table was located on the north side of the tabernacle. In Isaiah and Jeremiah, they show that divine destruction always comes from the north. Isaiah 41:25, God says, "I have stirred up one from the north." Jeremiah 1:14, from the north disaster will be poured out. Jeremiah 4:6, God says, "I am bringing disaster from the north." Jeremiah 46:20, a gadfly is coming against her from the north. And in Jeremiah 59, God declares, "I will stir up and bring against Babylon an alliance of great nations from the land of the north." The Bible indicates that north is regarded as the direction of divine residence, divine judgment, and divine authority. And the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. Jesus is the great King. When Jesus returned to heaven, he was seated at the right hand of the Father. If the table of presence represents God's throne, as I believe it does, then the physical location of Jesus at the right hand of the Father puts him between the Ark of the Covenant and his Father. He upholds the righteousness of God's government on his right hand, and he exonerates the righteousness of his Father on his left. He serves as mediator, our high priest. Now let's look at the laver. Physically, God required a state of purity, orderliness, and cleanliness among those who served in the temple. Spiritually, the application of water on the hands and feet reveal man's need for spiritual cleaning. Sin, much like desert dust, defiles our hands and feet, and we, like the priest in the desert, need to be made clean. The laver teaches us God accepts us for what we are, but he requires that we cleanse before we approach him. Jesus tells us in Revelation, nothing impure will ever enter it, and he's speaking of the New Jerusalem, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. The altar of burnt offering and the altar of incense. Now we're getting to the good part. 2 altars. Both were used for atonement. One was for individual sin, and the other was for corporate sin. This is important in Revelation's story. You're going to hear me say this more than once. The altar of burnt offering. It was located near the entrance of the courtyard. It was covered with bronze. It had 4 horns, one on each corner, resembled something similar to this. This was used for individual atonement. When a person sinned, the first thing they needed to do is confess their sins. The second was to make restitution for who they wronged. Then they were to bring their little perfect lamb to the altar, and the blood was put into a bowl. And then the blood from that bowl was put on the 4 horns of this altar. The leftover blood was put into the base of this bowl at the bottom of the altar. This service points forward to the atonement Jesus provided on the cross at Calvary. Now, in this service, this bowl of blood, after the service was over, was taken out into the desert, and it was burned along with the parts of the animal that weren't edible. So it was completely consumed. But let's look at the altar of incense and see the difference. It's located inside the temple in the holy place. It's covered with gold and not bronze. It also has 4 horns, one on each corner, and it burned a special incense recipe from God. It resembles something like this. This was used for corporate atonement, also known as the daily or continual. God's ways are always revealed in his temple. This service provides atonement for the world to prevent immediate execution by death. This service points backwards to Genesis 3:15, where Jesus stopped the execution of Adam and Eve, and Jesus continues this intercession daily for us. This service is performed by the high priest in the earthly temple and by Jesus in the heavenly temple, because he is our high priest. This service is not for any individual person's sin, but for everyone in general. It provides continual atonement on a daily basis for all mankind, giving them the opportunity to come to him, to bring their lamb to the altar. And if the whole congregation of Israel sin through ignorance, it is a sin offering for the congregation. This shows you the difference. It was performed once each morning and once each evening. Now, look at the difference. There was no blood put on the bronze altar of burnt offering in this service. The blood was put, after the throat was cut, into the bowl at the base of the altar. But this bowl wasn't carried out into the desert. The blood from this bowl is now taken by the priest inside the temple, and it's placed on the four horns of this altar, the altar of incense. This atones for the whole camp of Israel, not individuals. You're going to see that clearer as we go on. I'm going to say it again. It's important in Revelation's story. Now look at the number of temple items. There were actually 6 plus 1. The holy place had the Ark of the Covenant. The rest of the temple furniture was in the holy place, and in between the two was a veil. The reasons that there was a veil here, it divided it into 2 rooms, the holy place and the most holy place. It shielded the priest from the consuming glory of God, the Shekinah glory. And the priest only entered the most holy place one time every year, only on the Day of Atonement. But in Mark, at the time of the crucifixion, we are told that the veil of the temple was rent in 2 from the top to the bottom. There is no longer a veil needed in the temple. Now look at this, the temple diagram. The Ark of the Covenant in the most holy place. As you move east, you move to the altar of incense. You have the table of showbread to the north. You have the golden lampstand to the south. Out in the yard, you have the laver. And at the entrance to the courtyard, you have the altar of burnt offering. Now watch carefully. Is that cool or what? But this is even cooler. Notice that individual atonement takes place at the foot of the cross. Now let's look at the nation of Israel. Here's our little temple diagram. And the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali were to the north. To the west were Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. To the south were the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. And to the east was the tribe of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Isn't it interesting that Jesus was from the tribe of Judah and that he's going to return from the east? The tribe of Levi served in the temple. They served as the priests and helpers and teachers in the temple. But, question, how does a nation the size of Houston, which is really 3 Austins, just imagine, manage to individually bring their sin offerings to one single altar in an organized manner? Wouldn't there be total chaos? Everybody sin today and 3 million people try to run to take their lamb to the altar? You're going to learn a brand new word today. It's called course. In the concordance, course is defined as a section, division, or company, the root of to apportion, separate, and distribute. In 1 Chronicles, we read, "Now the children of Israel after their number, to wit the chief fathers and captains of thousands and hundreds, and their officers that served the king in any matter of the courses which came in and went out month by month throughout all the months of the year." God is not a God of confusion. There's organization. In Luke, look what we read. "There was in the days of Herod the king of Judea a certain priest named Zacharias of the course of Abia. And it came to pass that while he executed the priest's office before God in the order of his course." And I'm going to stop here just a minute to let you guys know that these two verses, I was able to calculate the exact date of birth of Jesus Christ. You know me and my little moon charts, and my little calendars. Well, we know by my presentation on the Jubilee calendar that Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River in 27 AD at age 30. So that makes him born in 4 BC. It's very simple. So since you need 9 months I had to get out 2 years. I had to get out 4 BC and 5 BC. And I calculated the Passover by the moons, by Nisan 1 for both years. I looked up the courses of Passover, and I figured out which course, because later on it says he was in the 8th course. Okay, so I figured out the 8th course when Zacharias left and Elizabeth conceived. And as long as we know when she conceived, don't we know that 6 months later we have another conception? I kept moving forward, and I calculated that 280 days after conception, which by the way was Christmas. Talk about the devil's counterfeit. 280 days from Christmas is September the 29th. Jesus was born September the 29th in 4 BC. And I didn't think another thing about it. Went to bed. 3 days later, I woke up and I said, there's got to be a significance there. It can't just be September the 20th. So I went back again and I calculated Passover. I counted forward 7 months. Okay, I get to Tishri 1, the Feast of Trumpets, and I go, oh boy, I'm getting close. There might be something to this. So I count off 10 days. And I was astounded. Jesus was born on the Day of Atonement. Is that wild? And I went and looked at every other year, 5 years before and 5 years after, and it does not land on September 29th for 10 years. That 1 year, can you believe he was born? Our atonement was born on the Day of Atonement. Anyone who would like to see that study, I have that. So we have 12 tribes in 12 months. Now we have some organization to the masses coming into the altar. But you didn't see this oops. I know there's an oops there, but you haven't seen the oops yet. Cassidy, let's say you sin. I'm going to give you an example. And you sin on June the 10th. The first thing you do is you confess your sin. You make restitution with who you've wronged. You take your little lamb to the altar. There you go. Oh, here comes November the 15th. Cassidy sins again. Don't we have a problem? Her course to get back to take her lamb to the altar isn't until June. That is her tribe's time to take their lambs to the altar. That's a long time. So here's the question. What happens between November the 15th and June the 10th for Cassidy to remain alive and not being executed for her sin? This is where I was explaining that the daily or the continual at the